Hello, everybody. Welcome to the NobCast. Apologies for being slightly late. That's totally my incompetence and my bad, but we're here now, and it'll be worth the wait, I promise you. Last week we had a fantastic Liverpool fan on in Tom Little, who was able to talk us about slots, tactics, and also give us a bit of a rival insight into the issues going on at City, and you guys seem to love that. So Gasky, the United fan's not gone by any means, but he's currently on the bench just while nothing's happening in the United world. But something is happening over in West London. I think Chelsea are. Is that right, Connor?
Yeah.
There we go. My geography's great. So something is happening over in West London. It's actually, it could have been. I had no idea what Chelsea were going to do this season. This is why when people said, where do you think they're going to finish the season, I said, genuinely, the range is 4th to 8th. I actually do not know what's going to happen with Chelsea this season. But they've actually been really interesting, of course. So what I thought would be really interesting to do is bring on, in my view, the best Chelsea tactic social media person out there, who's Connor Holden Football specifically. His channel is in the title of the video. I would really recommend checking him out, even if you're not a Chelsea fan. It's just really important, in my opinion, to just go and check out other clubs at tactical situations, so you can be more versed in those. So, for example, Connor, I've had no idea about Maresca's Leicester. So your brilliant tactical video on that's how I understand Maresca's Leicester. So please go check out Connor after this stream, and you'll believe me, after this video, you realize the insight they does have. Connor, thank you so much for coming on, mate. Of course. Let me know how you're doing. And also, could you just please let the viewers know, because I am just a knobhead with a microphone, but as I understand it, you are actually sort of qualified to talk about football. So tell the viewers why should we listen to you? Yeah.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the channel. I think we've been speaking about this for a while. So yeah, really happy to be on, and hopefully all goes well, and we can talk about all things football, not just Chelsea. But yeah. So for me, I guess, like you say, I mean, I've took it into this content space where I enjoy just talking about everything. But my original qualifications come through. I started off as a coach. I was coaching up until I was around 18, 19. Went to uni and I did performance analysis there. Did my degree and did all my sort of dissertation and all the bits and bobs around performance analysis. Had sort of points where I had to work with clubs during that. So such as Cambridge United, because that's sort of where I'm sort of based. And I've worked in a few different clubs doing performance analysis, opposition analysis, scouting analysis, things like that. So yes, you could say I've got those qualifications under my belt. Of course, instead of going down the route of I want to work in a club, I've decided to use that and come into the content space instead, purely because I think it's more fun. I enjoy it more. And I think it allows me to talk about more than just one club. I don't want to be sort of tied down to one end. I know that I'm very Chelsea related, but a lot of my other work stems into other clubs. I work with other YouTube channels and do analysis bits for them. So yeah, I sort of have used that to my full range, and I enjoy it more. So yeah, that's where it sort of stems from.
Perfect. There we go, guys. A qualified person on the LNobbins YouTube channel. We'll love to see that. As we go through the show, guys, this is an interactive show, so feel free to get your comments and thoughts in the live chat as we go. Jack saying new character unlocked. Letty says hi Nobbins and Connor, and hello Nick as well, my beautiful members. There we go. This is mainly a City channel though, so we will obviously get to Chelsea, and we've got to address the Cole Palmer question, which I know for a lot of people has become boring, myself included, but it's something that we still need to address. But let's start with City, for example, because as you say, you still watch a lot of City as well, and we'll obviously get into Chelsea and Palmer. Mixed reception in terms of City's start to the season, I think is fair to say. I know we're only 7 or 8 games in, so I don't want us to make any immediate knee-jerk reactions here. But there's obviously the Rodri injury that's happened, Oscar Bob breaking his leg. City seemed to start the season very strongly, and then sort of post-international break sort of started to slow down a little bit. A couple of poor results and poor performances specifically. Both of those against Newcastle. Good results, but poor performance against Fulham. And from my perspective, you know, maybe I went a bit overboard. I was a little bit concerned we might not even finish second if we don't, you know, go into the market to have a Rodri alternative. But simultaneously, there was a chart put out, I believe, by Mark Stats, which suggested that City have actually had one of the toughest schedules in the league so far, only really behind Ipswich and Wolves, who we actually play this weekend. How do you kind of view City's start to the season? Do you still view City as the favourite, even with the Rodri injury? How surprised have you been by, you know, like the resurgence of Liverpool and Arsenal in particular? And just like the problems at City generally, like what's your sort of overview of City's issues?
Well, it's tough with City because obviously, like going into the season, I'd expect that you guys very much saw yourselves as the favourites again. I did sort of go through that period in the summer of sort of changing my opinion very slowly. Calafiori and Marino were two of the pickups for Arsenal of three that I think they needed to sort of mount that charge and sort of split that gap and be able to challenge for a title. So they got two of the three pieces that I thought they needed. I think the one piece they didn't really address is a transition threat going forward, like another sort of striker or left winger. I know they got Sterling off us, but I think a different type. But Rodri then being injured, for me, it does slightly swing it to Arsenal. However, Arsenal have actually not impressed me as much as I thought they would this year. In different ways, sure. Like defensively, I thought even last season, I thought they're the best defense in Europe for me. I think they're really strong, and they've got set pieces and they've got these little sort of quirks up their sleeve and very well coached elements in their squad from that. But I just think that with Rodri being injured and Ødegaard being injured for them, it's almost levels it out again. So I'm sort of with you in the sense of it's more so for City about finding how can they fix that Rodri issue? And is it going to be dipping into the market in January? Is it going to be an in-house sort of solution? So which you've seen so far, you've had Kovacic playing there, who of course I know a lot about him. Big fan of Kovacic. I like Rico Lewis a lot. I think he can offer a lot in there. I think at the time there was quite a big debate. I can't remember if you touched on it with John Stones possibly actually playing as a nominal defensive mid. That was obviously one of the options. So I think that the biggest thing for you would be solving that issue in whichever means possible. And then just lastly on Liverpool, I think I didn't expect them to come as big as they are. I've always been huge on Slot, but I didn't expect it to click as quickly as it has. I do still think they're quite vulnerable, and we play them at the weekend. So funnily enough, we're going to find out. But I do still think that they've started extremely well, but they have, you alluded to the chart, the Mark Stats chart, they've had the easiest start. So I think we're going to tell a lot about Liverpool between now and sort of Christmas and that run that they've got. Similarly to how I think about Chelsea, I think you're going to learn a lot about Maresca's Chelsea side between that time as well.
Definitely. Just touching on that, you know, because this is a question I always ask my guests. It's really interesting to see what people think the solution is, if there is one. For argument's sake, let's ignore the market just for a second. So it's not as easy as just go get Zubimendi, just go get whoever, and that solves a problem or mitigates a problem. Let's look only in-house. From your perspective, what is... Because obviously, whatever solution City come up with, it's not going to be as good as having a fit Rodri. What solution for you, as close as possible, mitigates that issue or puts City into the most optimal position possible? Because it seems to me that there is no true in-house solution to purely mitigate, let's say, the lack of physicality in City's midfield, the lack of transitional defenders in that midfield, because Núñez is that profile, but let's be blunt, he's not going to get that chance to prove himself because Pep doesn't. He's almost giving him the Calvin Phillips treatment. He clearly doesn't fancy him in that respect. Is it therefore going to be a case of trying to lean even further into supreme control to try to mitigate that, you know, that threat on the counter-attack? Or is, by leaning so far into control, do you think that, as we saw against Newcastle, for example, and even Fulham, that's sort of like a double-edged sword where if it doesn't work out, and it didn't, that means you are like doubly, you know, by a factor of 2 or 5, still exposed on the counter-attack? How do you see it?
Yeah, I think where it sort of comes to is it's going to come game by game. So I think there's going to be some games where you're going to have to almost pack that midfield a little bit more to again mitigate, like you say, that physicality and that sort of transitional defensive ability that you have. So I think some games it's going to be more important that you maybe have, say, Stones stepping into there, but you also have a Kovacic and even a Gundogan sort of pushing back and in, so that you've still got a very protective rest defense there against sort of your, I don't know, Ipswich, your bottom half of the table. That's really
United.
disrespectful. That's just yeah, United, perfect. Those sort of sides that you can sort of allow a little bit more. Then yeah, sure. I think maybe the option there is even just starting Rico Lewis as a DM, so that he's got him in those areas to sort of pick up the ball and circulate play and get out, because I think he's absolutely phenomenal at that. I think he's so good in tight spaces, and I think even Pep said that himself, that he's one of the best in the team for that. So I think he's brilliant for that. But I do just think it's going to come down to less of a rigid sort of decision rather than being one sole problem solver for Rodri. I think it's actually going to end up being 3 or 4 players have to solve the problem throughout the season. So we might see between now and Christmas, Rico Lewis is the answer. But then between January and March, it may then end up that the actual answer is Stones. And I do genuinely think that it's going to be based on opposition and sort of form and just everything that sort of culminates into one. And it, for your sake, at the very best, you've got the very best at identifying that in Guardiola. So happy days, because he, if anybody's going to identify who should be playing that role at which any specific time, it is him.
Mm-hmm. Definitely, yeah. Guardiola is the difference maker. He is the crown jewel, 100%.
Yep.
I want you to give me 2 predictions now, please, Connor. Sorry to put you on the spot here. Mm-hmm. I want a prediction where City finish without dipping into the market, and then I want a prediction where City do dip into the market. And double question, so 2A and 2B. Sorry about this. I've just thought about it as I'm formulating it. I then want you to provide us with who you think could be a realistic signing who could potentially mitigate that issue. So Mendy's been the main one, for example, but I'll let you go for that again. So sorry. I'm not prepped, Connor, for any of this. I've just thrown all these questions out. It's so unfair. But we're putting these credentials to the test. There we go. So those are my questions to you, please.
Okay.
Predictions.
So the first question, we'll go not dipping into the market. I am going to go second. And I really hope I'm wrong, by the way, because I am a Chelsea fan.
Of course,
I'd much rather you just win the league and keep Arsenal away from it. I'd much rather it that way. But without dipping into the market and Rodri out for the season, I am going to go with my original prediction at the start of the season was Arsenal to win the league, and that's with Rodri. So I think it would be very disingenuous of me to change that with Rodri also being injured and that taking it even further away from City.
Mm-hmm.
So I will go Arsenal. However, if we did dip into the market, I do think it can be closer, especially because of the Ødegaard injury. And like I said, I've not been as impressed with Arsenal as I thought I would be. I think Arsenal looked far better last season than they do this season. So that being said, I think if you dip into the market and find the right player, that I think I've seen enough from City and not enough from Arsenal to suggest that, yes, you probably could then go on and win the league. So I would then actually sway more towards City winning it again. The player is tough, though.
I know. I shouldn't have asked that question, because it's an impossible question, because there is no Rodri replacement. I think that's like the point, that there is no one who can truly fill in that role. But I guess the sort of parameters that we're after with this play, because it can't just be it's got to be a short-term fix now, but it also this player's got to, because Rodri's coming back, of course. So they've got to be able to play alongside and preferably even ahead of Rodri. So it's got to be like this 6-8 hybrid sort of player who do they even exist? So what are you thinking, Connor? As I say, the names that have been linked, again, Zubimendi's the main one. Torino's Ricci has been linked as well. I've made no secrets about it. My preferred option would be Bruno Guimaraes, but realistically, that's never going to happen. I appreciate that. Onana would have been nice, but he obviously went to Villa. Names, who do you think could be that one? Do you have anyone niche, for example, that no one's ever heard of?
I agree. Right, firstly, Ricci is unbelievable. I think he could genuinely be the answer, but again, I don't know how likely that is, and then I also don't know about how his sort of development would be stunted with Rodri's return, which would be the worry. And that would also be the worry with the next name I'm going to give, because for me, I think you may have been linked with him before, but Adam Wharton, I think he's class. He doesn't quite fit. He doesn't quite fix the sort of physicality and sort of defensive transition aid that you need, though. But he would be another name that I'd sort of throw in the mix. I think you're right. I think Guimaraes is the sort of the one that makes the most sense in terms of maybe not realism, but I think it's the most sense of he can play as an 8 when Rodri returns. He could also then be the long-term heir to Rodri as a 6. And I don't think either way. I think either way that you play him, he's not going to sort of decline any of his ability, and he makes sense for the now and the present and the future. So for sure that makes the most sense. But I'm also with you on that. I think that's quite unlikely, especially in January. I think that's almost impossible, depending where Newcastle are. Niche names for the number 6. I've got some really niche names, but again, they're not gonna come to fruition. There's somebody called Sporting. He's absolutely amazing. I think.
Hey, we've just got their director of football.
Yeah, I think he's class. I think he's a bit of a Casado type. Yeah, he's right up there for me. Somebody I've been watching a while. Zubamendi's a good shout because he was obviously an option for Liverpool this summer. So I'm assuming you spoke about that last week with Tom.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's another option. I think he for me is like very Rodri. He's got a lot of the qualities that you get from a Rodri.
We saw that against England in the final, didn't we?
Yeah, unfortunately, when he came on and replaced him. But I guess the question there would be I couldn't see them two playing as a duo. So sort of as you say with the number 8, I think when Rodri then returns, I don't think Pep would play both if he was to stay next season, for example. So then do you then end up with an issue of Zubamendi is a bit of he's just a bench option by then, and he's sort of rotation option. So I don't know. It's tough. Yeah, Pranev just put in the chat. Dario Sugo, 19. He's the one. So yeah, I would go. I'd take Guimaraes as well, but I just think it's impossible.
No, I know. It was so annoying. I will never let this go. It wasn't impossible when he had a release clause that was there, and all the city
in the summer. Easy.
And all the City in the nose were saying, well, he doesn't want to leave Newcastle, but at the same time, if City put a bid in for him, he probably would come. So it's like, I don't know why we didn't do that. And it was like, he's too expensive, and that's fine. But, Enzo, Caicedo, Rice, this is just a going rate now for these midfielders. They cost over 100 million quid. Like, just so.
Do you know who would have been perfect?
Who? Tell me.
Your very own Romeo Lavia.
And maybe that is the perfect segue into the Chelsea situation. Now, shall we start with the title of this stream is the Cole Palmer question, of which I don't even know what the question is. That's what we're going to explore today. Shall we maybe park that just to one side for a moment? Let's start with just Chelsea generally this season, and then we'll get into Palmer. You've mentioned Lavia as well. We'll have City made mistakes. We'll discuss that. But I said at the top of the show, and make sure you're leaving a like on the video, by the way, guys. Again, apologies. It's my fault that the timings on this video are off. But if you could still like the video if you're enjoying it, that'd be great. Just to let Connor know, because I've got a great guest on today, so do make sure you are liking the video. Yeah, Chelsea have been really, really impressive, in my opinion, this season, relative to what I thought they were going to be at the start of the season, because I didn't think... I know it's early days, but it looks like they're going to be competing for top 4 properly. Whereas, again, last season, it's so... Again, I alluded to it earlier. It's so impossible to truly pinpoint how good Chelsea are before a ball was kicked this season, because Maresca is a question mark. I don't think he ever managed a top-flight club before Chelsea. Still like a mismatch of players. How do you manage that squad, etc., etc. But I don't know how will Cole Palmer fit in with like this rigid Maresca system. He's apparently very stubborn. But we haven't seen that. It seems to me that first game aside against City, Maresca's been very fluid and has opted to change his tactics and system as the season's gone on to maybe accommodate someone like a Cole Palmer, who, again, struggled against City, but thereafter has flourished. Can you very briefly, can you just confirm whether that is the case? So have Chelsea changed from the start of the season? And if so, specifically, what has changed to make Chelsea look, so far, very impressive?
Yeah, so the first game against City was very sort of... it almost felt like it was trying to get people on the pitch that had a good preseason, like they'd had the minutes in their legs. So it was very different. Like what we'd actually been doing in preseason a lot is inverting the fullback, but against City we actually didn't. We played Lavia, Enzo, and Caicedo all together, and then we had Gusto overlapping, so Palmer could come in from the right into the sort of half space. And we had that sort of dynamic going, which hadn't actually been used really in preseason, like once in preseason. And then we decided to roll out against City. I actually thought we didn't look too bad in that game, but again, I think quality just ended up showing off, and you got the win. Fair enough. From there, we did go back to sort of inverting the fullback. Palmer then started to come centrally and actually start as the number 10, which I've always thought is his best position anyway, where you can sort of have him involved in all aspects of play, especially in a Maresca system where the wingers are so sort of, they have to stay high and wide to almost just stretch the pitch and then be those 1v1 threat outlets. So I think that's a waste of Palmer to put him out there. I'd much rather have him centrally where he can be part of everything. He can come deep, he can get on the ball, he can help progress through the lines, but he can also then arrive in the box and, of course, score the goals that he's scoring for us. So brilliant, happy days. But in terms of Maresca's sort of stubborn nature, something that was very rife in the sort of community when he first joined. It was very, he's very stubborn. He's a bit like Sarri. He's going to play this one type of football. And like you said, we haven't seen that. And I did call for this because I do think that there's a slight sort of misconception of stubborn managers in terms of if they have a way of playing. And people from the outside looking in as a fan, I think you can very often sort of misconstrue that as them being stubborn rather than actually they make small changes, but within that structure. So they still change a lot of things. I think Guardiola over the years, some people would say he's stubborn because he wants to keep the ball, but he's the complete opposite because he changes so many things. If anything, he revolutionises football. And I think the same with someone like Arteta, and the same is going on with Maresca. So what Maresca has done is, like you say, he's made little tweaks. He still wants to dominate the ball, but there has been times where we haven't, and he's okay with that because he's willing to sort of allow that to happen if it means we can get the win, and he sees a different way of doing it. So against Brighton, we played more on the counter, and against West Ham, we played more on the counter. And I think as things progress with Chelsea, I do think we're going to see it sort of funnel more towards Chelsea keeping a lot more of the ball, Chelsea playing a lot slower, and Chelsea dictating a game. But I think at the minute, he's done a really good job of just sort of that first few months settling into play and allowing Chelsea to get points on the board so that sort of the Wolves don't come for him, essentially, because that would happen if a few losses came, and from trying to be stubborn and play this way, I think he'd have just been absolutely hounded. So I think he's done it very cleverly. It's sort of how he's sort of progressed through the opening few months.
Definitely, yeah, and I think that also like rival fans, certainly, you know, like Arsenal fans that I've seen, for example, very eager to, or rather, very cautious in praising Maresca, very eager to want Chelsea to falter and fail. And I think that we got the first snippet of that against, you know, Forest, for example, where they obviously dropped a couple of points. And then, as you say, the Wolves were out. And it was like, look, you see, guys, he's overrated. He doesn't actually know what he's doing. He can't beat a low block, which I think is unfair. Yeah. I think you can be impressed by how Maresca and Chelsea have started so far. And then, so specifically in terms of how has Maresca's adaptations and tweaks, how has that benefited a player like Cole Palmer, for example, who, again, a lot of people before a ball was kicked said that in a rigid Maresca system, a maverick like him might struggle. It's the opposite. He's actually flourished. So how has he got the best out of Cole Palmer?
Yeah, and I think that's the thing. I think some people before he joined, they thought that there wasn't room for sort of that maverick movement in a Maresca system. But I think it's the opposite. Maresca has these sort of pockets of space that he leaves open purposely for these +1 arrivals. And that's where Cole Palmer has really thrived. So you sort of see these wide pockets of space where Enzo Fernandez on the left and Cole Palmer on the right, they can drop in as the 10, receive the ball. And I think this is where we're really starting to see Cole Palmer have that playmaker arc, I like to call it. Whereas last season, he was so sort of focused on like top heavy goals, obviously a lot of penalties, sure. But he was the main man, he was the goal scorer. Everything went through him. But now having him drop in and have that freedom to drop and link play, but also then arrive in the box as well. So he can do both. And I think it makes him more unpredictable because players don't know what he's going to do next, because he could, like, they don't know how to follow him. Because there was this time against, was it against? It might have been against Bournemouth. He dropped pretty much to the left back area of the pitch to pick up the ball. And because he's obviously so threatening at the minute, everybody's watching him. I think there was about 3 players went with him. And it was just like, oh, okay, we're just going to leave open the whole middle of the pitch to everybody else then. So he's at that point where he can affect a game without touching the ball. And that's just another massive thing. And I think it's one thing to see that, but I think it's another thing to sort of understand that as a player, especially so young and so sort of on top of his game. You want everything to go through you. But something that really has impressed me with Palmer this season is sort of almost that selflessness to just take players away from the game with him without the ball, because he now knows that people are watching him, almost like Hazard at Chelsea, where like 2 men would have to go with him because they just didn't want him to touch the ball. So he's now affecting the ball at the game on and off of the ball. So I think
he's developed gravity.
It's really impressive. Exactly, yeah. And I think that's a huge thing to, like I say, the understanding of it, because some players will still get lost in that. I want to be the one to impact the game. I want to get the ball. I don't care if 3 players are going to come with me. I still want to get the ball. I'll dribble it around them. I'll find a way. Mm-hmm. But I think he does have that arrogance about him in times, but he also has that understanding of, if I make this movement, they are going to follow me and I can open up a lane for somebody else. So I think that's really one of his best parts of progression this season. And just having the freedom to go anywhere on the pitch is really allowing that to happen.
Have you been a little bit surprised that a couple of teams, in my opinion, have heavily underestimated Chelsea? I think of particularly West Ham and Brighton, literally playing into your hands, and sort of, it's almost like, to be fair, I think City did it with Chelsea last season in both games, at Stamford Bridge and at the Etihad, where we basically didn't really see you as, seem to tactically not see you as a threat. We played Alvarez in a double pivot, for Christ's sake, and played into your hands, and you're able to counter on us perfectly. And the same similar thing with West Ham and Brighton. Is that just like a sort of short-term mistake? You know, will teams catch on to the fact that Chelsea are actually quite good now? And do you foresee like a similar issues like against the Forest game, or do you think that, you know, we've got a tactician like Maresca, we've got players like Palmer, Madueke has also been particularly impressive. Do you think that Chelsea can navigate those issues, or is it sort of like, it's only his first season, let's chill on him, there's going to be all these stumbling blocks that we encounter?
For sure there's going to be a lot of stumbling blocks, but I think that the way to sort of see, like the way I see like the whole low block and like finding those sort of attacking transition moments against Brighton, West Ham that you find, I think that they sort of correlate with each other. In what I mean with that is, so obviously, as you say, I think they did underestimate us, West Ham and Brighton. I think they came out of their shell too easily, and that allows you to score. But when you start to punish teams by doing that, that's when you get the other end of the stick. So the more that we punish teams this season that try to play like that against us, I think that's when the norm and the default will become what you see against Forest. And that's when you can start to work on that as your sole, that can become your primary focus in training day in, day out. How are we going to break low blocks? Because that is the default of how teams are going to face us. But obviously in the first year of sort of Maresca, in the first year of most managers, it is almost teams will sort of chance their luck and they'll find out what they're against. And that's sort of what's happened in these opening months with Maresca. So like I say, I do believe the norm will eventually become Chelsea hold 60% of the ball. They have to find their way around teams like Nottingham Forest, and they have to find solutions. And that Forest game, as an example, a lot of people were very upset about that and sort of gave the whole low block problem for Chelsea. I don't think that's the case, but we created nearly 2.7 XG in that game. I think the chances were more than there. You should have won
it at the end, 100%.
Yeah. In fairness to them, they had a few chances at the end too, but I think that was more in the frantic nature of the end of the game, just sort of like where Chelsea were really trying to make sure they got the 3 points. It ended up with the odd attack for them going in the other direction, but I think on another day we win that 2-1 and everybody is over the moon. They're like, oh, look, we don't have a problem against low blocks. But because that goal didn't come, even though the chances were there, that instantly becomes Chelsea can't beat a low block. I think you have to look further into the context of, if we hadn't created anything in that game, then by all means, you can have the question, is Maresca not got a plan for a low block? Fine. But I don't think that's the case whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would, my motto is I'd much rather create the chances and miss them than not have any chances at all. I think that It's fixable. It's a relatively easy tweak to fix. A striker not finishing chances. Whereas if a striker's not getting chances, then that's another matter entirely. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Liam, who is a Liverpool fan, says, I wasn't worried about Chelsea at all. Now they're up next. I'm quite scared. Yeah, I think we got so lucky playing Chelsea at Stamford Bridge first game of the season in hindsight, because as you outlined earlier, Maresca wasn't 100% sure how he wanted to play. He opted to do like a false winger thing with Gusto. So I'm really happy that we got that out of the way, to be honest.
Yeah.
Nick says, Maresca's applaudable offensively, not so much yet on the defense. That's probably the weakest area of your squad, in fairness, I would say, your back four, because you're pretty stacked in the midfield, you're pretty stacked offensively, certainly out wide. The defense, maybe at centre half, another issue for you. Would that be like the main area to address? Would you say?
I'm actually quite happy with Cole and Fofana. I think that genuinely has legs going forward. I think it just is going to need time to develop the sort of plaudits that it deserves. And again, it sort of comes back to, I think with certain centre back partnerships, the more respect they gain, it's almost the less work they have to do, because players will purposely avoid and go different ways, and they know that they have to come up with someone like Van Dijk, and I hate the word, but I'm going to use it. Like, he almost has that aura to the point where
the A word.
Yeah, I know. I don't like it, but it is a thing, because if you just watch Van Dijk defend, attackers will just almost gravitate to the other end of the pitch purely just to avoid him.
What's the opposite of gravity? What's the opposite? What's the force opposing gravity? That's what Van Dijk has. That's what aura is, really, isn't it?
Yeah,
from a defender's perspective. Chat. What is the antonym of gravity? Let us know. Like, what is the force opposing gravity? The thing. That's what he has. Van Dijk. Absolutely.
But yeah, I think Fofana and Cole will have sort of that. I think they have the legs to be really a perfect centre back pairing. I think you have an aggressor in Fofana. I think you have, if you can keep him fit, that is. I think you have one of the, he's so physically gifted. He's so fast for a recovery defender if you want to play the way you want to play, where you want to squeeze teams high, and he's going to be your sort of recovery man getting back. I think he's perfect for that. He's really good at sort of meeting the ball first, defending forwards. And then Colwell, I think he's just got the brain. He's more of a sweeper. He's a bit like Thiago Silva. His passing's unbelievable. And I think that dynamic can work really well. The back four, I actually do think in time is quite good. I think if anything, it's the goalkeeper that would worry me more than anyone in that back four, because again, you've got Gusto and Reece. If you can get Reece back fit, he's supposedly back in training.
If you can get Reece James fit, listen to the words coming out of your mouth.
Oh, trust me, he'll be back in the injury bed in 3 weeks. I'm sure of it. But you never know. He's back in training now, so fingers crossed. And then Cucurella and Vega at left back, two that I massively rate. Vega being a new one that I think is absolutely amazing. So yeah, I think defensively, I think it's more of a system thing at the minute, and I think it's also a squad build thing, because like you say with the midfield, I think something that we did sort of negate in our midfield build was having sort of the physicality. And Caicedo and Lavia, they bring that in a different way, but it's not the same as having a sole sitting midfielder who will just sweep up anything with the height as well. So I think it's just going to take a little bit of time defensively for it to come together, but it's not actually been as bad as it looked like it could have been in pre-season.
Sure. No, absolutely. And it's early days. It's literally, he's had 8 games. So time to come. He's still got a very young defense. Well, 100%. Repelling. There you go. So Van Dijk has repellent. There you go.
Yeah. Sure.
There we go. And I think Dave's comment here sort of leads us into the final talking point. I think we've got to discuss it. Of course, a Chelsea fan. You mentioned Lavia earlier, so we've got to address it. Staffy says think City were all right with Palmer going because we have Bob coming through. Conversely, Lukey Duke says full send Palmer City, bring our boy back. Shall I give you sort of my thoughts on the whole Palmer situation, Connor, and then you can tell me if I'm a stupid, smelly idiot, and then you can give your POV. Does that sound good?
Yep.
Yeah.
Sure.
So obviously, Palmer. First of all, I just want to address, Palmer. I'm very happy for Palmer on an individual level. I of course don't want him to win league titles at Chelsea, but I'm genuinely really happy that he's doing really well at Chelsea. I'm not one of these people who wants City players to fail once they leave. I want our ex-players to do well on an individual level, so I am really happy that he's doing really well. But obviously, the question, whenever Palmer does well, the question becomes, or the statement is, City made a mistake in getting rid of him. Blah, 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 blah. Now, this is the way I interpret that situation. Cole Palmer, if you just take the player out of Chelsea now, so like cherry pick what he is now, and pop him in City's team now, then I agree that if that was the state of play, then it would be a mistake to get rid of that player. But my contention is that the player Palmer is now wouldn't have been allowed to develop into the player he is now had he stayed at City, unless you basically, because people say, well, drop Foden. Well, it's not going to happen. But the real thing is drop De Bruyne, because Palmer doesn't really play like Foden at all. If we're saying that Palmer is more of, you mentioned it earlier, if he's in his playmaking arc, then then in terms of who would he replace directly in the centre at City, the question, the replacement isn't Foden, it's actually De Bruyne. Now, is Palmer ever realistically going to play ahead of Kevin De Bruyne? The answer to that is no, in my view. If we look at the landscape of City's team at that stage, obviously there was Oscar Bob coming through. At that point, Palmer was still viewed as maybe a right-sided player. We obviously had a Doku at that stage as well. Rightly or wrongly, Palmer wasn't going to play. If Palmer had stayed, that's all well and good, but then what happens to Oscar Bob? Then Oscar Bob doesn't get any minutes at all, and he barely played last season, so he would have played 0 minutes probably last season. So my interpretation of it is that it's all well and good saying it after the fact, but as with Lavia, he would not be able to go to Chelsea for that big fee had he not had that season at Southampton. And he wouldn't have been able to go to Southampton had he stayed with us, obviously. So that's my interpretation of it, Connor. Am I talking nonsense? Should City have just... Because you've also got to bear in mind that Palmer wanted to go, as I understand it. Do you see where I'm coming from? Or is it just a case of you just should have seen the vision and you should have benched Foden, you should have benched De Bruyne, and you should have just locked in and started Palmer there and then, in light of, the really good Super Cup performance, or rather the Super Cup goal and the Community Shield goal? How do you interpret that? Is it copium from me, for example?
No, it's not. I think I had this conversation the other day with somebody, and I pretty much explained it exactly how you did there in terms of the picking him up and putting him back in. Because go. I do genuinely believe
Connor can come back on the channel, guys. Sorry, go on.
I don't think Palmer becomes the player that he is today without the move, because exactly what you said, as good as he was, and people knew this, like City fans knew how good he was. It's not even a thing of City fans saying that they didn't think he was a good player. But then, rightly as you say, Foden's already ahead in the sort of development phase, and he's already in the team. He's also himself not starting every game, and that in itself is a massive talking point, right? So then you've got, and De Bruyne, he's not going to get dropped. When he's at his best, you're talking about the best player in the Premier League. So you're talking about these players, and then you've got Palmer on the bench. So that's not going to happen. So for him to get that development and to become the player he is, he almost needed that move to become the man. And I think it's also, he may have ended up becoming a brilliant footballer, but it may have taken far longer, 3-4 seasons, where he gets drip-fed minutes, and he's also maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? He's also, like, he's not the sole guy, so he's having to sort of, like, delegate things. Whereas at Chelsea, he came in and he was instantly, within months, he was the star man. Everything went through him. So it almost springboarded his entire career forwards, because he was just able to get far more touches, far more involvement, far more praise, far more everything was going through him. And you've just seen a meteoric rise. So that does bring you to the whole, could he be brought back now for 150 million? That's what's been being said that somebody sent in the chat. I did see it the other day. For me, he's priceless now, so I would very much say no. But I think you're completely right in the sense that if you picked Palmer up and put him back in there now, sure. But were City wrong to sell him? As many fans would like to take the mick, and as it becomes nowadays with Twitter and like comment sections and things like that, like fans will want to sort of, that'll be something that's funny. It's something to laugh about. It's the same with Chelsea and Salah and De Bruyne. It's funny. They're good now. When Salah was at Chelsea, he wasn't. And in my opinion, still to this day, that wasn't a mistake, because he was just poor. And he went away and he refined his game and he became the player he is now. But I still don't think he'd have become that at Chelsea, because when he was playing for us, he wasn't good. he was really poor. So I think environments are as important in a player's development as the actual talent itself.
Mm-hmm. And you raise a good point there, RE system as well. Like,
yeah,
and not trying to take anything away from Palmer, obviously, but one of the reasons why he was able to have such a stellar season last year was because I think it's fair to say all the play stemmed through him. Certainly all the offensive play stemmed through him. Now, is that ever, even Foden last year in a Player of the Year season, the play didn't stem through Foden. The team wasn't built around him in that same way. So even if Palmer stayed and he was given the minutes, let's say he was just like, nailed on, you're going to start every single game, the team would never have been set up in the same way either, which would have got the most out of his abilities. I don't think that any player under Pep has ever truly had the team built around them outside of Messi, to be honest. I don't think he's ever done it really with any, even like a player as good as De Bruyne. The team's never been properly built around him in the way that Pochettino did so with Palmer at Chelsea. So I totally agree with you. It's partly a minutes thing. It's partly an experience thing. Also probably a mentality thing, because I think you mentioned it earlier. Palmer's got arrogance. That's not a bad thing. He just knows that he's a very good player. You're never going to have that sort of like main character syndrome at City. I don't think anyone has that. Even like players as good as Haaland and De Bruyne, they're not nailed on to start every single game. Like if they have bad performances and they get dropped, it's that sort of thing. Like then the team's not built around them necessarily. So I'm totally with you. I'm very happy that we've got a Chelsea fan on to say that. So it's not just me coping. Obviously, hindsight's a thing. And if you could pluck him out and pop him in City's team, brilliant, wonderful, obviously. But we know that's not how life works. Same with Lavia. If we could just pick out Lavia now and go, boop, buy back, boom, there we go. But again, that's not how life works. He had to have the development season at Southampton, and he didn't want to have, he didn't want to be on loan at Southampton. He wanted to go. It's like with Palmer. He didn't want to buy back. He wanted to go. So I guess the only true mistake is City didn't put in a buyback, but he didn't want to buy back. So therefore, it's a non-starter of a conversation because then he doesn't leave. So that's my sort of take, and I'm very happy that you're in line with that. Guys, we are approaching the end of the show because Connor does have to leave in like at 10 or so minutes. So please get your final thoughts and comments, questions in the chat for either myself or Connor. Let us know if you've enjoyed this installment of the NobCast, and I'm sure we can get Connor on in the future if you enjoy it. If you don't like him, then I won't ask him back on, But I'm pretty sure you do.
Yeah, see it. The chat saying it already.
They're turning.
Yes.
Nam says, if we don't get Musiala or Wirtz, City should go all out for Palmer, says Nam. I'm just looking from a Cole Palmer perspective. I don't think he'd want to come back, to be honest. I think that from his perspective, that's his chapter in his life. That's done. And he wants to move on. Grass is greener and all that sort of stuff. I don't think that Palmer would even want to come back to City. Instinctively, Connor, would you agree?
Hope not. The only reason it slightly worries me is just if we don't sort of pick up and quickly enough to sort of match his rise to dominance, because he's going to want trophies. So I believe in what we're doing, and I believe that we will eventually, but that would be the one thing that worries me. Does he think that he needs a way out to get trophies quickly? But I'm hoping you're right, because I think he's now, with the platform we've given him, I hope he sees that as a sort of like wanting to reward, sort of give it back to the fans.
Yeah, definitely. I was going to say something wise then, and I've forgotten what it was. That's what it was. Because what we said before, I've totally echoed that with Kobbie Mainoo at Man United. United need to get good relatively quickly, because for me, he's a player who could be, at a very, very good team, like a team competing for league titles, Champions Leagues. So, Palmer's good enough to be. He shouldn't be in the. I mean, he's not even in the Conference League because he's not even including in your squad. You see what I mean?
No.
He's a player who needs to be in the Champions League competing. So if Chelsea need to be that team within the next. I know he's got a big contract, whatever, but we all know that's not really how it works. Next 2 or 3 years, I think that Chelsea have got to start competing for the biggest honours to keep their best players.
They've got to match the rise, haven't they? They've got to go with him rather than him exploding and like leaving them behind. So they've got to match it. And I do think that the way the project is built in terms of buying a lot of young players. I think the idea is that they all grow together. So I think in 2 or 3 years' time, you are looking at a far more complete team that is going to look way better. But yeah, I think it's absolutely is the main worry is if Palmer just completely explodes even further, which seems impossible, but he just completely outgrows the entire project itself.
Mm-hmm. Steph says, I don't believe it, a sensible Chelsea fan. I told you guys on yesterday's show that I had the best Chelsea fan coming on, and you guys didn't believe me, and yet here we are. So there we go. Engraver says, love to see Connor. Yeah, big up. If you want more of Connor, by the way, his YouTube channel is in the video title. Just click on there. It's Connor Holden Football again. Really recommend to go check it out, guys. You don't have to be a Chelsea fan to enjoy it. Again, his Leicester video on Maresca was so informative to me. Musty, with the question on everybody's lips, who's got a better bald head, Pep or Maresca?
It's got to be Maresca.
Oh.
It's Pep. Pep's he's the iconic.
He's the one. He's the baldy, isn't he?
Yeah.
The vibe says, is Connor ready for Chelsea's funeral on Sunday? Do you play? Is it Liverpool you play?
Yeah. At Anfield.
At Anfield.
So,
quick
I'm
score
sure
prediction there.
I'm gonna go 2-2.
Oh, high scoring. Oh yeah, you always draw, to be fair, don't you, against Liverpool?
Yeah.
Except
at Anfield as well. Yeah. There
you go. Engraver, who's a Chelsea fan, says, what current City players should we nab next?
That's a good question. I really like Oscar Bob, but of course he got injured.
Yeah. He's back in training next month, apparently.
Yeah. Do you know the one for me? And people have said it because I said this in pre-season, and I think I did like a little sort of TikTok or something about it. Oscar Bob was the one getting a lot of the praise. I love James McAtee. I think he's absolutely excellent. I think he's so good. He'd be one up there for me because I think he's unbelievable, and I think he's the sort of player that, again, sort of like Palmer, I think if he becomes the man somewhere, I think you just see him go from there to there. I think he just really takes it up a notch.
Yeah, totally agree. There was a game where I think City played Everton a couple of years ago, and Palmer and McAtee were on the pitch, and at that time, I was more impressed with McAtee, to be honest.
Yeah,
so obviously Palmer's gone to the play he is, but I think absolutely right, McAtee could have that ceiling as well. So I thought, again, last few questions, guys, because Connor does need to go shortly. Do you think Palmer wanting to leave because of less minutes could also become a case of Oscar once he's back? How do you sort that as a club with a promising academy? Yeah, it's a balancing act, isn't it? I guess I would say that I think, but for the injury, Bob probably, even I know Savio's played very well. I think Bob was nailed on to be our main right winger this season, to be honest. So I don't think he's going to have an issue in respect of minutes for me personally. And him coming back would be a massive thing as well. Engraver, the Chelsea fan, Rico Lewis, that'd be great, especially with Reece James's issues. That could be a really interesting situation. But he's not going anywhere. Don't worry about that.
That's why I didn't mention Rico Lewis, because I see him as like he's untouchable. He's already there, so it's like I didn't even think about him, but he's unbelievable as well.
Yeah, he's got lovely hair as well.
He got Kukurea. We already got that. We don't need another lot of loads of.
Yeah. Oh no! Imagine selling McAtee to them and Palmer. It must not happen. And Cheryl says, "Come on, Chelsea. We need you guys to take points from those Reds, but don't get too complacent, because as we discussed earlier, Chelsea, is something happening? Question mark.
Creeping.
They're there. They're fourth in the table right now. They're only like a couple points behind us. They are there, guys. It's been a pleasure, Connor. Thank you so much for joining me once again, guys. Please go check out Connor's channel. It's really, really good. Fantastic analysis, really informed. You heard his qualifications earlier. He's not just a knobhead with a microphone like me. He actually knows what he's talking about. So please go check him out. And once again, if you enjoyed this show, let us know in the live chat. Let us know in the comment section. And we can, of course, discuss having Connor back on the channel in the future. Connor, thank you so much, mate. Is there any final wise words that you would like to say in general about anything to the chat or whatever?
Just thanks for having me on. And like he said, drop a like on the video. Make sure that you drop a like, because it does help out more than anybody knows. So make sure you hit the like button. And of course, go check out my channel as well. Won't just be Chelsea analysis. I'm trying to extend it further. I'm trying to not just become, like I said earlier, clamped into one box. I want to cover all clubs. So yeah, go drop a like on this video. Go drop a like on some of my videos and subscribe.
You heard it. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I will be back on the Twitch tonight, and we're going to be doing something very, very fun and different. We're going to be doing a SmackDown versus Raw 2007 General Manager mode, because why not? It's very weird, and it'll probably be chaotic, but it should be lots of fun. So make sure to join me for that later tonight on the, that's at 8 p.m. tonight on the Twitch. Link is in the live chat. Until then, guys, thank you so much for joining us, and I'll see you later tonight. Bye-bye, guys.